After his father's sudden death, this young man is forced to grow up fast as his family starts to struggle financially. And when a rich neighbor offers him a simple gardening job, it feels like the perfect solution. But what he doesn't know is that this is no ordinary job. Soon, all the older women in the neighborhood start requesting his services, pulling him deeper into a secret world he never saw coming. And just when everything seems to be under his control, all of the greed and lies with the hidden agendas begin to collide until the entire town is thrown into chaos. In the opening scene of the movie, we are introduced to a peaceful family, a couple and their two children, Jason and Jay, enjoying a quiet morning together in their front yard as they prepare breakfast, with everything around them feeling warm and perfect. But that calm moment is suddenly broken when the father begins to feel a sharp pain in his chest. Although their mother, Nicole, urges him to rest, Jason still insists on playing catch, unaware of the seriousness of the situation. It was already too late. Then the movie goes to 1 year later, where we see that everything has changed. The family is still dealing with their loss and have decided to move to a new housing complex called Purity Falls, which is the quiet and affordable place Nicole had chosen out of necessity as their savings start to run low. She had even decided to return to work as a teacher at Purity Falls School, and both Jason and Jay are forced to transfer there as well. However, we see that Jason is still struggling to accept his father's death, and he resents the move deeply. This is how he meets Chad, who introduces himself as a former student of the school and that he is about to leave town for further studies. However, their brief conversation is cut short when a woman calls Chad for help, and he quickly leaves to attend to her. Later, as Jason's family settles into their new home, one of their neighbors named Courtney pays them a visit, bringing food and introducing herself. That is when we learn that she has a very successful cosmetics business and that she also runs a small plant side business. When she sees Jason, she offers him a part-time job with surprisingly good pay and benefits. Seeing this as an opportunity for Jason, Nicole encourages him to accept the offer, hoping he can start saving for his future. That night at his home, we see that Chad is speaking on the phone with his girlfriend, promising her a better life and talking about plans to even buy an apartment. But suddenly he hears a noise as if someone has just entered the house. So he goes to check as he tries to cautiously move toward the pool. Then out of nowhere, a mysterious figure appears from behind him and hits his head, causing him to fall in the pool. By the next day, as Jason and his family prepare for their first day in school, they see the news of Chad's death, and this makes Jason tell his sister that he had only just met him a day before. Later that morning, they eventually go to the new school, where Jason quickly meets Daniel, a friendly student who shares his interest in wrestling. Although Jason is hesitant at first to join the school team, everything changes when he notices a beautiful girl named Clara. When Daniel tells him she often watches the matches, that's all the motivation Jason needs. And during his first training session, Jason surprises everyone by defeating the school's strongest and previously undefeated wrestler, as we see that his determination is driven by his desire to impress Clara, who is watching from the sidelines. Soon after, the two finally get to meet, and Jason wastes no time asking her out. Although she hesitates at first, when Jason offers to treat her, she agrees. However, reality soon hits Jason hard as he realizes his wallet is completely empty, leaving him with a problem he didn't see coming. So later that afternoon, Jason decides to accept Courtney's offer to work as a gardener. And when he arrives, Courtney warmly welcomes him, and before starting, they sit down to talk about his experience. That is when Jason explains that he learned gardening from helping his late father, and Courtney continues to press him to talk more freely with her. The atmosphere was calm and friendly, but then something strange happens as Courtney deliberately spills her drink on her dress, and in an attempt to clear up, she asks Jason to help. However, as he does, Courtney quickly pulls him in, and unable to resist, the two spend private time together. In the end, she gives Jason an advance payment and tells him that by Saturday, he can begin working at a neighbor's house. The next day, Jason heads over to the address Courtney provided, fully prepared with his tools. But as he begins working, things feel off when an elderly woman starts to approach him, catching him by surprise. And without hesitation, Jason quickly leaves the house and goes straight back to Courtney for answers. And this is where everything starts to shift for him, as Courtney eventually tells him the truth. The gardening job was never the real task. Instead, Courtney reveals that she simply wants Jason's company, as she feels lonely and desires the presence of someone young and strong to fill that emptiness, and that some of her rich friends may also need his companionship from time to time. But Jason doesn't buy the idea, and he decides to quit immediately. Little does he know that the situation runs much deeper than it seems. It turns out that both his connection with Courtney and even his friendship with Daniel may have been part of the larger plan. And as he talks with Daniel back at school, Jason notices a bruise on his face. At first, Daniel avoids explaining what's wrong, but when Jason brings up Courtney, Daniel finally opens up, as he admits that he also works for her and actually enjoys it because the job is easy and pays well. As he talks, Jason listens quietly as he starts to doubt what to make of it all. In the meantime, we see that Nicole speaking with a student named Amber, who was Chad's girlfriend, as she reveals that Chad's death might not have been an accident as many believe. Instead, she suspects it was intentional as she opens up that someone may have wanted to stop Chad from leaving town for college. She also mentions that Chad had connections within the Purity Falls complex, making the situation even more suspicious. Back at home that evening, Jason is surprised to see that Courtney is in their house. However, Nicole soon explains that they were going out together, and when Jason asks to borrow his mom's car for the night, Courtney surprises them by offering to lend him her late husband's old car that is in her garage, although she eventually whispers that it was with no strings attached. With financial pressure still weighing heavily on the family, Jason feels compelled to continue working with her, and Daniel's positive experience only reinforces his decision. And immediately, he voices his decision to Courtney. She wastes no time in giving Jason another assignment, this time at a house belonging to someone named Harris. That evening, Jason heads there, and to his surprise, the woman is not as old as the previous one. She eventually orders him to get undressed, and the two spend the evening together. And from that point on, Jason throws himself fully into the work, and before long, he starts earning significant money. In fact, he is even able to buy his mother an expensive gold necklace, which came as a pleasant surprise to her. However, while his financial situation improves, his personal life begins to fall apart, until Clara eventually finds out about the kind of work Jason is doing with Courtney, which is similar to Daniel. But while Jason wonders how the information got out, Clara tells him that she can't accept it, so she ends their relationship. But even at this, Jason doesn't let it affect him too deeply and continues living his life as if nothing has changed. Shortly after, Jason receives a message from Courtney asking him to visit Karen's house, who was the client he had previously hardly left her place just a few weeks ago. But this time, he goes there and resumes the job. However, things quickly take a turn when Karen's husband unexpectedly returns home. Thinking fast, Jason manages to hide in a closet and avoid being seen. But during his escape, he accidentally drops his belt in the room. After the incident, Jason becomes frustrated, especially when he realizes he won't be paid. By the time he meets Courtney to complain, she tells him that he had failed to complete the job properly, which is why he isn't getting paid. Feeling used and angry, Jason decides to quit working for her, and he later tells Daniel about his decision, only for Daniel to warn him that walking away might not be so simple. And he's right, because not long after, Jason is approached by a man named Benjamin who threatens to cause trouble for him and his sister if he refuses to return to work for Courtney. Now left with no other choice, Jason reluctantly goes back. Then a few days later, Courtney hosts a party at her place and Nicole is invited. When she arrives, she soon sees that the event is filled with important guests, including the mayor and several of Courtney's clients. But during the party, Jason's mother accidentally witnesses an argument between Courtney and Karen, as we hear Karen demanding her money back from their previous arrangement, just as we learn that her husband had found Jason's belt in the house and is now filing for divorce. Not long after, Nicole goes to use the restroom, only for her to mistakenly enter the wrong room, where she sees Daniel with an older woman. And this altogether starts to raise more suspicion in her mind. Just a few days later, Benjamin visits Karen to deliver money, as he tells her that he is also there to make peace with her. So Karen allows him inside. However, things take a turn when she finds that the envelope is actually empty, and Benjamin immediately tries to choke her to death. She eventually fights back and uses her husband's gun on him, but his strength overwhelms her until she succumbs. But Benjamin is wounded as he flees back to Courtney Faust. However, when Benjamin asks for help, Courtney refuses, as she accuses him of always being reckless and bringing her more trouble. Left without assistance for hours, Benjamin eventually dies from his injuries, and in a bid to hide the evidence, Courtney takes his body away in her car. Elsewhere, when Jason returns home from work that night, he is confronted by his mother, who is beginning to suspect his late-night activities. She warns him to stay away from Daniel, as she tells him that she believes that he's a bad influence, especially after what she saw at the party. Now feeling trapped and uneasy, Jason starts to think about how everything has been unfolding in the past few months. And that is when he begins to suspect that anyone who tries to leave Courtney's operation ends up in danger, just like Chad. This fills him with determination to expose the truth, as he plans to report Courtney to the police using evidence he believes is in Courtney's journal. Soon, Jason learns that Daniel is scheduled to meet a special guest at Courtney's house, and he decides to seize the opportunity as he convinces Daniel to pretend to be sick so he can take his place and search for the journal himself. In the meantime, we see that about the same time, his mother also starts investigating Chad's old school yearbook, as she too now senses something isn't right. By night, Jason eventually arrives at Courtney's house, only to discover that the special guest is the mayor, making the situation even more complicated. However, while Courtney and the mayor appear occupied, Jason quietly searches for the binder, only to see that it is no longer where it used to be. But after a few more tries, he eventually finds it hidden under the bed. However, just as Clara collects it, the mayor suddenly appears and snatches it from him, and that is when we learn that he's in on the whole situation. But before he could attack, Jason acts quickly and manages to get the book back and hit the mayor. At about that same time, Nicole, who is now deeply concerned, keeps watching Courtney's house through her own windows. And just as news reports begin to surface about the disappearance of Benjamin and Karen, her fears are confirmed as she realizes that Jason might be in danger. In the meantime, we see that as soon as Jason tries to leave the house, Courtney intercepts him and takes him to the garage, where she handcuffs him to a pole. By the time Nicole arrives, she eventually finds him in there, but just moments later, Courtney enters the room once more with the intention of moving Jason elsewhere. However, while she tries to unhook him, Nicole, who was in hiding, accidentally knocks a pole over and exposes her presence, leading to a tense confrontation. However, with Jason's help, Nicole manages to overpower Courtney and stab her as she brings the situation under control. But just as they start to think that all is now settled and Nicole tries to take Jason away, Courtney grabs her gun once more and approaches them with the intent of finishing them for once. However, before she can pull the trigger, a loud shot rings out as we see that Jay has shot Courtney to end their family's nightmare. In the end, everything changes for them, and 6 months later, we see that the family has returned to their old home in a bid to leave their nightmare behind. And as the story comes to an end, we see them celebrating Jason's graduation, as they have finally found peace after everything they've been through. And that's the story of the movie Purity Falls. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling us what you think about the movie. Until next time, stay safe.